Vic, for the introduction, and thanks for joining us. The deck that I'm showing is actually available out on the SAFE website, and as is all of the material for SAFE, other than the training material itself. So one of the things I want you to know is it is a freely open, available framework, not something that is proprietary, certainly to RightStar, but available to you as well. I want to start out really looking at the software age. You know, we're at a software age. Everything's interconnected. We have this real-time world in which every industry is dependent on technology, and every organization, at least in part, is a software company. To remain competitive, enterprises need to digitally transform their operations, their business solutions, and their customer experiences. So the larger challenge in many enterprises is that maybe your current business model, your organizational hierarchy, and your technology infrastructure can't keep pace with the rapid change that's required. So today we're going to talk about competing in the age of software. The creators of SAFE, and that Dean Leffingwell leads that group, and you can go out and find out who else is involved in the Scaled Agile framework. But the creator of the framework has been inspired by some of the new works in the field, including Mick Kirsten's new book, his Project to Product, and John Cotter's new book, XLR8, so Accelerate, so it's phonetically spelled. The two are studying technological trends, and Kirsten concludes that those who master large-scale software delivery will define the economic landscape of the 21st century. So that's a pretty bold statement. But when you look at the combined revenue of Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, you'll see that it's equal to the gross domestic product of Japan. So the economies of the world have changed dramatically. If the Global 2000 doesn't get to the same level of competence that these unicorns have achieved, thus the Unicorn Project, the balance of power will be eventually in the hands of those few companies, and that's really not a healthy thing. So we're going to talk about the technological revolutions that have happened and where we are today. In technological revolutions and financial capital, Carlotta Perez plots the evolution of society, business, and financial capital based on the technological revolutions that have occurred over the last few hundred years. She talks about these disruptive trends that happen every generation or so, including technology trends such as the age of steel and heavy engineering, or the age of oil and mass production. And you can see the others illustrated here. And what she concludes is that the technology revolutions radically alter society. First, via a mass movement in financial capital, which then results in new production capital, so for goods and services. Massive societal changes, disruption in new economic order eventually sets in, and really these become world-shaking disruptions. And you see they occur in three distinct phases. So you have this installation period, where new technology and financial capital combine to create this Cambrian explosion, so a geological term for a relatively short time over which this large diversity of life forms. And you have new entrants, and then eventually you hit this turning point where your existing business, you either master the new technology or you decline and become relics. Production capital, so you've got your deployment period where production capital of the new technological giants start to take over. So you think about where we are now, we don't know what's going to happen here. What is the turning point? We might be in the turning point. But if you look at production capital following financial capital, I don't know if we're past the turning point, if we're in the mid-turning point. It probably started in the early 2000s, so we're probably hitting the middle of that. You see a lot of those big giants that we talked about are taking advantage of the technical age, this digital age. If you think about some other case studies, and you'll see that case studies are pretty big with the Scaled Agile community. You go out to the Scaled Agile Framework site, you'll find a lot of case studies. If you look at what we're seeing here, it's really pretty astounding to witness that it seems to be easier for a digital company like Tesla to bring software-based vehicles to market faster than all might and money and accumulated knowledge of all car makers over the last 20 years. So if you look at Apple, now the largest watchmaker in the world by revenue, and the Apple Watch was only introduced in 2015. So this means we're in the midst of a technological revolution, and it really does create an existential crisis for some of the world's largest and most valued enterprises in insurance, trading, finance, banking, even manufacturing, medical technology, aviation. Automotive is huge. We've all heard of the automated cars, right? Autonomous vehicles. So it seems like every business must be a software business now. Again, at least in part, but probably more so than ever, companies are looking at themselves as software companies. Even John Deere is now looking at themselves as a software company because that's what's helping sell their products. In the analysis of work in his book, Project to Product, Kirsten notes that with respect to production capital, the productivity of software delivery at enterprise organizations is usually behind that of tech giants, and the digital transformations that should be turning the tide are failing to deliver business results. So this means that many of the large and successful enterprises face this crisis. The distinctive competencies and massive tangible assets that got them there, distribution, real estate, manufacturing, retail, local banking centers, they're not going to be adequate to assure survival in the digital age. But, these leaders, they get it, so why is it so hard to transform? It's not a question of should we transform anymore. I think people are seeing the benefit, but the efforts to actually go through a transformation are falling short. In Kotter's new book, Accelerate, he notes that culture and management paradigms associated with the past technological revolutions have really built this legacy of inflexible hierarchies. Companies are unable to adapt to modern challenges. It's not the technology necessarily, it's looking at the organization. Cotter started to look at what he's calling the network. And so you'll see this in Accelerate, the book, his recent book. So the successful enterprises don't start as large and cumbersome. Rather, they begin as fast-moving, adaptive networks of motivated individuals. That's how Google started. That's how Amazon started. They didn't start with a large hierarchy. They started with the motivated individuals aligned to a common vision, and they really were focused on the needs of their customers. So the roles, reporting relationships, they were fluid. People collaborate. It's an organic collaboration to identify the customer needs, to explore solutions, to deliver value in any way they can. In other words, it's adaptive, and it's an entrepreneurial network of people working towards a customer-centric purpose. So that's a bit different than the hierarchical view. As the enterprise succeeds, it wants to expand on the success and grow. This means that the individual responsibilities have to become clearer to ensure that the critical details are carried out. So to add expertise, specialists are hired, departments are created, you have policies and procedures, legal and compliance that drive the repeatable, cost-efficient business operations. The business starts to organize their function, and that's when silos begin to form. Meanwhile, operating in parallel, you've got this network that continues to seek new opportunities to deliver value. So the network is running at a speed of innovation, and the hierarchy is really designed to handle a lot of the compliance, legal things sitting behind the scenes. So, to achieve that increasing economy of scale, the hierarchy continues to grow and grow. By assuming practices and responsibilities incumbent on large business, it begins to conflict with that entrepreneurial network. There's authority of the current revenue and profitability needs behind it, the hierarchical organization collides with that faster moving adaptive network. So the result is the network gets crushed, and customer centricity is one of the very first casualties that go. So the question is, what do we do about it? We don't want to trash what we know, and we don't want to start over. We don't want to break everything down and try to build it from the ground up. And I think that's why some of the failures happen in these transformations, is because there's this idea that we have to break everything down and rebuild it. But what Cotter is suggesting is that you need a dual operating system. You still need the hierarchy and you still need the network. They need to operate together to create that business agility that you're looking for. So the hierarchies that have been built over the past 50 years, and if your company's not been around that long, chances are it's been 20 years in the making. You've got these hierarchies. Government certainly is no stranger to the hierarchies. They've done a really good job of providing the time-tested structures and practices and policies. So these hierarchies support recruiting and retention, growth of employees. They're still needed. But how do you organize so that you can reintroduce that entrepreneurial spirit? So when you look at this, Cotter suggests the solution is not to trash it, but you restore the speed and innovation of your network while leveraging the benefits of that hierarchical system. That's what SAFE really is about. So by organizing that second operating system around value streams instead of departments, your hierarchy is more functional. It's around how your departments work, but your value stream network is organized around looking at what the customer values. So SAFE offers a way for enterprises to focus on the customers, the products, the innovation, and growth as a dual system that sits alongside that hierarchy. It can reorganize, and that's the benefit of having that flexible value stream network, is you can reorganize whenever you need to without completely disrupting your organization. Recently, SAFE 5.0 has been released, so beginning of this year, early January. It's been revised. To focus on business agility and put some customer centricity in the center. It's also been revised in a couple of other ways that we'll get to, related to the team and the program and how it looks at smaller implementations. But SAFE is an online knowledge base. It's full of proven, integrated principles, practices, competencies to implement lean, agile, DevOps at scale. And actually, SAFE 5 is shifted the language to DevSecOps, so to make sure that security is pulled into there. You can implement this second operating system and enable your enterprises to adapt quickly, to respond to the emerging competitive threats, to identify and deliver incremental customer value, and to maintain quality. And that's really a very critical point. You're maintaining that quality in an evolving product and solution portfolio. We're bringing the focus back to what it takes to be great, to bring great solutions to the marketplace, and that might sound a little odd and have some echoes maybe of even politics, but this is what we're doing, is we're refocusing hierarchies on the customer. Very easy in large hierarchical systems to lose focus on customer and focus on the hierarchy instead. To achieve that business agility, you have to look at the whole organization. So agile development has provided significant improvements to organizations. It's helped many of the world's enterprises survive. And by itself, it's just not enough. So agile development is the start, but it's not going to carry you through an entire transformation. What began in software development has to expand to encompass the whole enterprise, changing how people work, how business operates. Simply, you need business agility. That's the determining factor that will decide winners and losers in this digital economy. So by empowering the business and technical people to make quick decisions, including how to allocate resources, how to align the right people around the right work, business agility permits those companies to capitalize on emerging opportunities, whereas the hierarchical system tends to have a lot of gates, and it takes a lot more time to move through the decision-making process. The new SAFE 5, according to Nick Kirsten, monumental release. he's convinced it's going to help countless enterprises. So this is from the author of the book, not necessarily the author of SAFE, but looking at how the competencies align with what he has strategically stated in his book that he sees in alignment. Business agility needs technical agility and the business level commitment. Oftentimes we see this start as a technical shift. So digital transformation is something that technology handles, but it really is the whole organization. Everyone involved in delivering the business solutions starts to use lean and agile practices. So let's talk about what exactly is SAFE. Okay, SAFE's the world leading framework for business agility. This is based on a recent Gartner study, and SAFE is emerging as the top selected framework. It is a knowledge base. It's openly available to you, so anybody can go to the SAFE Scaled Agile Framework website and look up any of these concepts. And if you were really dedicated and maybe putting in 80 hours a week, you probably could pull it off without much support from coaching. The benefit here is that there are SPCs, so scaled program consultants such as myself out there, and partner companies with SAFE that help companies get the implementation going. But this is cost nothing to enter the game. You just go to the framework site and you start reading. The results, and this comes from case studies, so you can go visit thescaledagile.com. You see the URL down the bottom. The results, and these are ranges, right? 30% more happier, motivated employees on average, 50% faster time to market. And this is really important. I don't know how many of you are in an organization when projects may be going on for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and very little actually makes it out the door to the marketplace to start earning economic value. If you look at quality, just because it's faster doesn't mean it's sloppy. It's actually higher quality, 50% defect reduction, and increase in productivity. If you look at people who are adopting SAFE, there's big companies, there's government, there's also small companies. So what they put in the case studies are a lot of the big companies because this is where you get the maximum benefit of using the framework, is when you're a very, very large company. However, what they're not showing here is some of the benefits of the smaller companies for using portions of SAFE, which I'm going to talk about in a couple slides. So head over to those case studies and find an organization that somewhat looks like yours and start reading about how they are using SAFE. In recent news, you can see that Airbus, you've got from the CIO IDG magazine from NASDAQ, you've got testimonials that their organizations and their businesses changed. They're gaining ground in the marketplace. They're producing higher economic results because they're implementing frameworks such as SAFE. The new SAFE 5.0 looks at 7 core competencies of business agility. And when you go out to the site, you'll see the big picture. It's a very large picture of lots of icons. And this is the overview tab of that. And it will go through the core competencies. So you can see that you've got strategy on the right. These are more strategy-oriented. And there's more execution-oriented items on the left. You don't have to do all of these. So we'll talk about in a couple minutes what it means to only do part of these competencies. So as you grow, as you scale, you add more competencies. But let's look at Lean Agile leadership first. This is one of the core competencies. It starts with the management team. It starts with the top level of leadership. It doesn't start with your IT people because they will quickly hit a wall. They will quickly become frustrated. It has to be an organizational effort led by the leaders of the organization, the company, or the government agency. People who have the authority to change and continuously improve how those systems govern and how work is performed. Lean Agile leadership involves a mindset and principles component. So you're changing people from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, from I can't do this, I've hit the limit of my knowledge, to I can grow, I can get better. You look at core values, the lean agile mindset, excuse me, and SAFE principles are all available out on the site. Leaders have to lead by example, and all of those concepts, authenticity, emotional intelligence, lifelong learning, there's all available. If you click on that, it'll explain to you what those mean in context of SAFE, but they're not unique to SAFE. As Dick pointed out at the very beginning, psychological safety is over here as part of leading the change, and that is mentioned as a key component of a transformation through the Uniform Project and the Phoenix Project. So mindsets can change. Really, the basic tenets of the Lean Challenge is that traditional management theory, it challenges that traditional management theory. It looks at the manager as maybe not being the one who knows more than everybody below them, but it's a way that you're starting to think differently, and that's really foreign, and it's very difficult. One of the big reasons that you have the failure of digital transformation is that leadership can't make that shift. The House of Lean is really a classic metaphor describing values that are essential for lean thinking. It's based on Toyota's production system. Taiichi Ohno is considered the father of the Toyota production system, which became lean manufacturing in the U.S. We started to call it that. So derived from lean manufacturing, principles and practices of lean thinking as applied to software, product and systems development are now deep and extensive. So, for example, we've got a number of people, including Dean Leffingwell, founder of SAFE, have described aspects of lean thinking, placing many of the core principles and practices in a product development context. So along with these, we present the House of Lean. So this is the SAFE House of Lean, with foundation being leadership, the goal of delivery of value. In the 1990s, some lighter weight, more iterative development methods arose. And in about 2001, a group of thought leaders in the development community gathered actually in Utah. And they started talking about what works and what doesn't work. And there were some differences of opinion on specific merits of one over the other in terms of what's valued on the left and what's valued on the right. And if you look at the shared beliefs, it really dwarfs the differences in the smaller pieces of what they do and think. So you look at the core manifesto, and in total, they all agreed that they're being successful because they value what's on the left more than what they value on the right. And unfortunately, in those hierarchical organizations, sometimes the documentation of process and tools becomes more important than the individuals and interactions, which actually prohibit people from working in an effective, quick, agile way that targets value as opposed to targets what's documented. So that, the lean part, we already talked about with the House of Lean. This is the Agile Manifesto. This is the Agile part. The SAFE is based on Lean and Agile combined. So when we look at the SAFE Lean Agile principles, you're going to see similarities between Lean and Agile embedded in the 10 principles. And the principle number 10 is actually new in SAFE 5. It was always to organize around value with value streams. However, this makes it more explicit. So when you apply this framework, these are the things that you believe in. These are the core ways that you go about doing software development, but even running your company. So there's really no off-the-shelf solution, but I think if most organizations take a look at these, they could buy in easily to at least half right off the bat. One of the goals here is to start to educate people about what the SAFE Lean Agile principles are, and also then hopefully get you interested in some courses which go in a little bit deeper. For example, why do you limit the work in process? A lot of companies, if you look at their project management office and you ask them how many projects they have going, and they're a company of 300 people and they have 150 projects going at one time. Well, that's certainly not limiting work in process. And the result is probably that they have a lot of delays in their project and maybe a lot of churn and people churning over from one project to another because the focus shifts from day to day sometimes, hopefully not that frequently, but certainly week to week, you have priority given to certain projects. So these are the principles that you believe in. They're lean, agile-based principles, and that's what it means to have lean, agile leadership. So team and technical agility is what you might think about when you think about DevOps and when you think about scaling agile. And of course, that is a big part of FACE. You look at team and technical agility, you have three pieces here as well. Agile teams are the cornerstone of business agility, period. So if you already have agile teams starting to work, you've already set your foundation. The team and technical agility competency, which describes lean agile skills, principles, practices that high-performing agile teams use to create high-quality solutions. So you may have agile teams, maybe they're not high-performing yet, but one of the things that you do is you start where you are, and that's actually an ITIL principle, and you move forward and you grow, and we're going to talk a little bit about assessments that you could put in place to see the growth that your teams are experiencing. You look at agile teams, you're still going to go through the design, build, test, deploy. One of the key pieces here is that you're going to build cross-functional teams. You're going to iterate with Scrum, Kanban, XP. It doesn't all have to be Scrum, and this is one of the things that people, is a little misconception, is that we all have to work in 2-week sprints, and it's not necessarily true. There is some synchronization, and there is some cadence, but you don't all have to work exactly the same way. This includes vendors. So you can bring vendors into your SAFE framework, even if they're using waterfall, because what you're really going to do is you're going to collaborate at key points. And eventually what you're going to do is you're going to build a team of agile teams. So you're going to have these cross-functional agile teams. You're going to organize multiple teams into what's called an agile release train. You think about 50 to 125 people on a train. So that's not one team, that's 40 teams. They're all working toward one common solution. So that's part of limiting work in process. That's part of achieving some focus. And by putting them all on one train and one cadence, it also improves collaboration. Agile product delivery is a competency. This is the ability to deliver your innovative products and services. So if you look at agile product deliveries, customer centricity is key. You also are going to develop on cadence and release on demand, and this is an important concept. This is, release is different than deploy. So you're going to use your pipeline, your continuous delivery pipeline, and you're going to have continuous integration and continuous deployment. But you're going to release when the market is ready for you to release. And the calmer approach to DevOps, some of you may be familiar with CALMS, C-A-L-M-S. SAFE adapted that and is now just shifted it slightly, has R for recovery. But you're going to apply practices of automation in various DevOps or DevSecOps practices so that you can release whenever the product management or the business side is ready to do that release. Customer centricity in design thinking is new in SAFE 5.0. The idea that you're going to do research. You're going to do research in the customer marketplace, but you're also going to do research on your users. And this is going on in parallel with your development work so that you're constantly developing a pipeline or maybe you can call it a UX runway for the thinking behind why a product is being deployed and some testing along the way that's low-cost testing. You're not necessarily developing the whole thing, but you have people who are out there, your product managers, they're looking for what might work in the marketplace. And there's lots of techniques that can be employed there. There's a lot of training that goes along with how to help your product managers understand what to do in the marketplace. But customer centricity, design thinking is something that is not, again, unique to SAFE, but is incorporated in SAFE. Here's your pipeline, and there's that adaption of comms. You can see it's very similar to comms. Again, the difference in it being recovery instead of, I believe the S stands for sharing, but sharing is a culture of shared responsibility, so it kind of was redundant in SAFE's point of view. This does focus on automation. Without automation, without the ability to continuously integrate and continuously deploy, you cannot release on demand. So all of the DevOps concepts that you think of still apply within SAFE. Your trains continuously deliver that value. So it may be things like they're delivering the value in terms of having working software sitting there ready to be released. And of course, the release is where you start to get the economic value. Again, aligned to a common mission through a single program backlog. It's synchronized on a common cadence called a program increment. So what we do is we take a block of time and we all work and plan around the same cadence. There's really no magic except for this joint planning. At the beginning or end, depending on where you are, how you look at it, but at the very beginning of your journey, you will have what's called a PI planning, a program increment planning. You will get all of your stakeholders together face to face. It really is important to have people in the same room. If you can't do face to face, then maybe you can have one group in one physical space, another group in another physical space, and then collaborate through some sort of technology medium. But having people together is very important, and this is unique to SAFE. Management sets the mission with minimum constraints. So it isn't just that teams get together and it's a free-for-all. Management is setting the vision, they're setting the goals, they're setting the economic goals, they're setting the market goals. And requirements and design emerge during this PI planning. So nobody comes with a giant design document that was prepared, 6 months earlier. This is where the design takes place. This is where we talk about the requirements. And the teams create and they take responsibility for their plan. This is, again, important. In the traditional way of working, you have management who sets the direction, project manager who says, yes, we'll do this plan, and then tells the team, okay, we got to get this done, regardless of what the schedule is or regardless of what you think is achievable in the scope. Having the teams involved in this is a critical part of SAFE. If you look at enterprise solution delivery, I'm going a little bit quicker here because I know we're coming kind of toward our end, but when you look at enterprise solution delivery, this is where your lean system and solution engineering comes in. This is where your quality management system comes in. This is where your engineering team looks at variable and fixed intent of the solution itself, and where you can then start to experiment with some of the variations before you narrow it down to the exact solution you're going to do at the latest responsible time, as opposed to taking out the innovation early on and then setting a project plan and saying, okay, work on this for 6 months. Whether or not the environment changes doesn't matter. We have this project plan in place. Again, SAFE allows a way to coordinate trains and suppliers so that when you do have vendors who are working with you on a solution, there are specific activities and constructs for the supplier to engage with the train. When you're really talking about some of the larger solutions, this is when you're really talking about having your backlog and your supplier where you have a very large solution train. Many organizations are too small to need this type of thing. You don't have the complexity of having 4 or 5 suppliers and 10 trains running at the same time. This is more of your Googles, your Amazons, your Microsofts, your Ciscos. But if you're a smaller organization, you still can scale to this, and you still can use some of the practices out of here. So I'm going to move forward a bit here. Here, again, you can get all of this on the SAFE website. The 9 best practices. These are important, and you really can't just pull one out. But when you're talking about enterprise solution delivery, you may not have continuous integration, but they call it continuation integration, where you integrate most of it, but you're not stopping and halting and freezing code to do the full integration. It helps you bring multiple trains and codes from multiple different places together. Lean portfolio management. Again, many of you may not need this if you're a small group, small company, but once you start to have to make decisions on where the money's going, and this is really important if you have, for example, 4 different departments and they're all vying for a part of the budget. How do you know where to put the money? Well, when you're starting to put money out by department teams, it becomes really complex because if the systems cross over the department teams, who funds it? Instead, you set up a different way of governing, a different way of funding. You're funding the whole train, regardless of the departments that cross over. So the network is funded, essentially. And then aligning with your strategy and investment funding. This is really important. The enterprise executives, business owners, architects all have to make sure that it's aligned to what the company sees as the strategy. As a team member, I want to have some autonomy in how to build the solutions, but what solution to build has to be guided by other factors in the organization. Again, there's not an endless amount of resources to fund whatever it is people think they want. There's got to be a way to narrow that down. And that's what your strategy and investment funding as part of your lean portfolio management team does. Again, you're finding value streams aligned with your business strategy. You're not funding departments. And you're also putting what are called guardrails around your budgeting so that you give some flexibility to the people who have to manage the work to make some decisions on where to move forward in a bigger way versus pulling back on and not maybe developing another solution that doesn't seem to be accepted by the customer. We don't have to go and get approval every time the project hits a decision point, as long as we're staying within the guardrails. And we're not reassigning resources. We're keeping them on the train. We may be assigning them to different work, but we're not constantly moving people from team to team in a different department. Organizational agility is a competency. When you look at how this is broken out, you're looking at developing your lean thinking people and your agile teams, again, based on the House of Lean, your SAFE principles, and the Agile Manifesto that we looked at. We're developing strategy agility, the ability to shift and change as you see it needed in the marketplace, and looking at your value streams so that you can identify where there's waste, where there's delay time, where there's process time that can be shortened. So in terms of strategy agility, you want to continuously be sensing what's going on in the market. You want to make your strategy changes decisively. So they use this pivot without guilt, right? You just keep moving forward. Don't spend so much time in your analysis that you miss your window to be competitive in the marketplace. Innovate like you're a startup. Oftentimes it's very difficult in big companies because of the hierarchy, because of the gates. So this allows you to innovate like your very first startup companies that are being very successful because they can shift and move. They can implement change quickly. And this is really important. Ignore sunk costs. Again, in the traditional way of looking at things, you have a project that's been running for 3 years and you've sunk $4.5 million into it, and you're going to need another 6 months to get over the finish line, but somebody says, I don't think the customer wants this anymore. In traditional environments, you'll have somebody in the room that says, yes, but we've already spent $4.5 million on this. We can't stop now. It would be a waste of money. And what SAFE is saying is ignore your sunk costs, because you can't just continue to waste more money if you know the customer isn't going to want it. And that's a really tough thing to understand, and that's why you iterate and you release short pieces of work quickly so that your sunk cost is less. You're not having a 3-year project before you start to see some economic value. And then the continuous learning culture is really a key competency when you're doing a full implementation of SAFE. Not to say you can't start to bring this into your organization even if you're using just the essential levels of SAFE, but creating that learning organization, making sure your shared vision is published. People understand what it is you're trying to do so that when we have to make decisions, we align to that shared vision. Relentless improvement is critical. That idea that you're in a constant sense of danger, that there's never a spot where you're going to say we're good enough. We're always looking to get better because there's always somebody in the environment who is looking to get better that is ready to pull you right out of the marketplace. The learning organization is a management paradigm. It's the idea of taking personal mastery, looking at things holistically, systems thinking, and combining it with the idea of learning as a team, developing some mental models in your organization that everybody's oriented to so we all understand how we're able to learn and grow together. If you look at Dr. Edwards Deming, he taught that by adopting appropriate principles of management. Organizations can increase quality and at the same time reduce costs by reducing waste, rework, staff attrition, and litigation while increasing customer loyalty. The key is to practice this continual improvement and think of manufacturing as a system, not as bits and pieces, and also think of your software, your company strategy as a whole, not little parts and pieces, little departments. You want to, so I'm going to move on here because we're running out of time. As a leader, part of leading the change is understanding how you would go about implementing this framework. There is a roadmap readily available out there for you. You just click on the roadmap at the bottom of the bottom of the big picture. It'll tell you what your steps are. Most companies are coming from a waterfall or an ad hoc agile, which means some teams are doing agile, some teams are doing it well, some teams are sort of playing with agile. So here's where you might be. At some point, you're going to find a tipping point. Some companies, the tipping point is where the new CEO comes in and says, I'm not giving you one more dollar towards your project until you straighten this out. Others, the tipping point could be that we're losing so much market share that we simply don't think we're going to survive another year. So you recognize that tipping point, and it could be on the commercial side, it could be on the government side, and then you start to train your change agents. You develop a group, and this could be right out of your PMO. You develop a group who's going to take responsibility for moving this initiative forward. And then you partner with somebody who has done this before, one of the safe partners. RightStar is a safe partner. There are a lot of safe partners out there. Of course, I'm partial to RightStar. But you find a safe partner, and you start working with them, and they're going to coach you, and they're going to deliver some training to your executives and your managers. They're going to talk to you about how to manage a portfolio in a more lean way and help you identify your value streams. This is a bit of a foreign concept to some people. What is our value stream? Help you identify it because this is how you're going to align your network. Your people are going to be on your Agile release train. Your funding is going to be aimed towards your release train. So understanding your value stream is critical. Eventually, your SPC, your consultant, your coach will help you create your implementation plan, get your people trained, and get ready to launch your first PI planning. Once you finish PI planning, once you experience PI planning, you leave with this sense of almost euphoria of how great it is to be able to collaborate in this unencumbered way. And during the next 10 to 12 weeks, your team is actually executing work. At the end of that, you come together again before your next PI planning, usually the day before, and you do an inspect and adapt because we're focused on relentless improvement. We're going to continue to look at what we did well, what we can do better, let's fix this. And management is at the PI planning, so they can help remove obstacles right away. This roadmap is available out there, as is the big picture. So down the bottom of the big picture, there's your implementation roadmap. But remember, this is a journey. You're not going to get to an end point here. And that's what this measure and grow piece is about. It's about looking at where you are and deciding where you want to get better. So one of the things that we can do is help you go through, there's a number of assessments that SAFE offers. The one that I would say to start with is your business agility assessment, which takes a look at the competencies and the 21 different sub-areas or elements of those competencies and helps you chart where you currently are as an organization and then determining your next steps based on where you want to go. So these assessments are out there, and we can help walk you through these assessments and get you started on your way toward that implementation roadmap. I encourage you to take a look at the knowledge base. These are free resources. You're going to see articles, case studies, guidance, lots of presentations, anything from the SAFE summits in the past. You'll have them published out there, which really talk about how real people are doing this in their organizations. And of course, you'll have your glossaries that is available in a lot of different languages. And you can configure SAFE to fit your needs. And this is really a critical piece. If you are not a very big organization, you probably don't need full configuration. You might start with Essential SAFE, which is really looking at how your agile teams work together in a cadence, using DevOps practices, looking at quality, using Scrum or Kanban, implementing some design thinking. You may start down here. And even if you only have 5 teams, that synchronization will help alleviate some of the stress off of your systems teams who have to span across multiple teams, and usually they're in demand and there's never enough of them to go around. So somebody says we need to hire more, but hiring more doesn't solve the problem. It's the collaboration that starts to solve the problem. So you can start out here at Essential. You can scale it then to Portfolio. So even if you only have one value stream, you start looking at how you organize your budget against that value stream. And eventually you can scale up. The idea here is that you're going to have a change agent that's going to help you, and you're going to also train change agents in your own organization. So you're going to have people who become your SAFE program consultants. And then we're going to certify other people in their various roles so that they understand how the framework comes together. You can connect with the SAFE community. Head over to scaleagile.com. There's also a SAFE Summit coming up this year. It is in Denver, I believe, where you can meet a lot of different people who are trying to implement SAFE and attend sessions for that. Here's just a quote. If you look at Associate Director of Technology from AT&T. There was a tipping point for them. They needed to adapt to market conditions. They had the knowledge. They had people in their IT who understood DevOps. They had the skills. They just didn't have the experience pulling it together. So that's what SAFE can help do, and that's what your SPCs can help you do. So again, you can connect with some partners, and I want to leave some time for some questions. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want to leave some time for some questions.
Okay, great job, Jenine. Actually, I see one question right now, but now would be a good time to ask a question. You just go to the Q&A box and type the question in, and we'll get to it. The first question, Jenine, here is, it looks like it's from a developer, and he says, we just moved to Agile, and we do a daily 15-minute stand-up meeting. This meeting has turned into about an hour a day. What a time waster. What's up with this?
Yeah, so. Right. That tends to happen. It depends on who you have in the meeting. Oftentimes, if you have people who are not on the direct team, that tends to expand it because they now want to ask questions that should be asked in another forum. They really should be 15 minutes, and this is where the coaching of the Scrum Master has to come in to help understand what to look for. Why is it that your scrums are going so long? You don't want to have an hour meeting every day. This takes away, nobody likes that, right? It takes away the productivity, makes developers very unhappy. Developers of all people do not like to sit in meetings. So I would say one of the things I would do first is look at who's attending your meetings. The scrum are just for the team. If you have business stakeholders that are swooping in and out of your meetings, that could cause some problems. And then maybe work with having a coach come in and taking a look at how your scrums are run. We'd like to look at it more holistically, but certainly having somebody come in and coaching a couple of agile teams and finding best practices that work for you and just sharing those best practices sometimes helps, but we can come and look in a more objective way. And it's generally that some other concepts are missing, something's not happening somewhere else, which is causing these meetings to go long because the communication is just not flowing in whatever area it needs to flow, so it's the only outlet people have.
Yeah. Let me just ask you sort of a more general question, because in RightStar's move to a more transformative type of a culture, a more collaborative type of a culture, there are certain tools that we've started to take advantage of, and I think every company deals with this. How do you get more of your money's worth out of the different tool sets that you have? And in the whole DevOps pipeline, you've got a number of different tools. Of course, we're an Atlassian partner, and I think that what we're seeing is that most companies are barely scratching the surface when it comes to what they can do to get more out of what they already have. And so, what are some ideas? I guess training would be one thing, but any other ideas? And of course, this is something that we'd love to come in and help organizations out with, right?
Sure. I mean, when in the early stages, you have teams that are acting like startups themselves, and so they're picking the tools that they like best, and they're making them work for their team. The problem comes in when you have to then scale this wider and getting these tools to talk to each other. So you don't necessarily have to standardize on a single tool, but having some integration points, some key integration points is really important. So I've seen teams, for example, on their design side of things, the product manager that using something like AHA for a roadmap. And that works great for them because they don't have to necessarily have the same type of information or organization as, let's say, a team does in their stories, in their backlog. But there's an integration between AHA and Jira, or AHA and another tool, could be Rally, whatever that is. But the integration is very important. And the same thing with testing. And so if your testing team is using something completely different and it doesn't integrate with your dev tools, that makes it just adds some overhead. So it's tough because you don't want to thwart your teams and take away tools that are near and dear. So it might be that you start to invest in understanding how they can integrate, and maybe you can get everybody to agree to use the same tool, and that tends to make things easier.
Yeah, and I think another thing that most organizations really don't do a very good job of is getting dev and ops to operate sort of under the same umbrella. And maybe one way to facilitate that a little bit would be just with a tool. Maybe if you're using different tools to do development than operation, well, then maybe you can integrate the two tools together. Or maybe if it's Jira, for example, you can integrate Jira with Jira Service Desk, right? And of course, those have a nice integration anyway. So, that's, I think, an important thing to get everybody to kind of get on the same page and really improve efficiency a little bit too. So.
Sure. I mean, the tools are generally the starting point, but the real point is organizing your network so that it supports the value stream. So stop thinking of things in departmental sense and letting your department make the decision of the tools, but come together and understand how your network has to use the tools to all achieve the same goal. Okay.
Great. Well, I think it's pretty much the top of the hour. So, Jenine, I wanted to say thank you very much. Excellent job. I want to also say thank you to the attendees out there for coming today. If you know, and I don't know if there's another slide or not, but if you want to contact RightStar, here's what you can do. I know we're having an safe class that's coming up. I think it's next month, and it's a 2-day class, and I think we've sent out some invitations. Obviously, if you're on the webinar, you probably have received an invite to that. This is an in-office class, so we're based in the Washington, D.C. area, so that's something to think about. We certainly love to have you attend, and you can learn even more, and then you can get a certification as well. We also do these webinars from time to time, on average, at least every other week or so. So we hope to see you the next time. So that's it. Again, thanks everybody for your time and attendance today. I really appreciate it. We're going to sign off now. So we'll see you next time. So long from RightStar.